Almost 30 years ago, Toyota shook the luxury car world by creating not only an all-new luxury car brand, but an all-new luxury car flagship, the first generation 1989 Lexus LS. Then in the years that followed, Lexus proved that they could not only make a world-class luxury car, but they could also make a luxury car that was actually reliable. Since then, some have accused Lexus of being in kind of a slump. The last generation LS, which this model right here in front of me replaces, lasted for 11 years, even though it was tweaked here and there. Aside from that, perhaps because Lexus and the Lexus LS especially have been so associated with reliability, the Lexus LS engineers had tended to be quite conservative. So in the last generation LS, you didn't see quite the same kind of gadgets and gizmos that we saw in some of the German competitors. We especially didn't see turbocharged engines under the hood. But that's all very different for the all-new 5th generation LS. Up front, we find the latest interpretation of the Lexus spindle grille. It's what they call this overall shape right here. The model that we're driving this week is the F Sport trim. The F Sport is sort of the sporty version of the LS, but we don't get any extra power. Instead, this is a handles better, looks good package. Because this is the F Sport, we get these squiggles right here inside the spindle grille, and it actually is a little bit narrower than the regular model because we get these air intakes on either side right there. We also get squiggles on the outboard sections. Over here we have an air duct to help relieve pressure up front, and on that side we actually get some additional cooling. Personally, I think the non-F Sport model of the LS is my favorite in terms of the overall design. That particular spindle grille is very different than what we see here. It has more diagonal lines going on, and it has a more 3D effect than what we see in the F Sport. I really think that model is quite attractive. We have new headlamps over here. These are 3 LED modules inside this headlamp. They're all projectors, and this is one piece with this very distinctive accent strip at the bottom. The headlamp module also contains some additional elements on each side, and of course an LED turn signal strip. It's obvious from the side profile that the LS is a long luxury sedan, and this has grown notably for 2018. But the biggest change for 2018 is that there is no short wheelbase version of the LS anymore. That means that the only one we get is this model right here at 206.1 inches long. This is right about the same size as the BMW 7 Series and the Mercedes-Benz S-Class. That is a little bit of a change for the LS, of course, because in previous years, we had a model that was a little bit shorter than the German competition. The size increase is perhaps most important to people shopping for base or lower end trims of the LS, because this has grown considerably over that short wheelbase model, and the rear passengers really are the prime beneficiaries of all this extra room. Out back, we have full LED tail lamp modules that mirror the styling that we see in the headlamps. These also have kind of an extra little shark fin over here on each side in the chrome to help tie some of the other themes together. Because we have a spindle up front, we have a spindle right back here on the trunk lid to help tie things together, and we actually have real integrated exhaust tips at the bottom of the rear bumper. That means that while you're driving, exhaust gases are actually coming out of these exhaust tips. I realize it sounds a little strange to say that, but in many German cars these days, the exhaust tips that you see on the bumper are no longer functional, and the real exhaust tips are actually hidden under the bumper, but we don't see that in the new LS. As with many luxury car companies, the number on the trunk no longer indicates the displacement under the hood. So under the LS 500's hood, we actually have a 3.5-liter twin-turbo V6, not a 5-liter V8. But that's not really a problem because we actually get more power and more torque out of this engine than the average 5-liter V8 would be able to give you anyway. This engine is rated for 416 horsepower and 442 pound-feet of torque. That gives this more oomph than most of the competition's base engines. We also get a few extra gears because this is mated to a 10-speed automatic transmission that Lexus designed just for their large luxury vehicles. Fuel economy comes in at 23 miles per gallon combined for the rear-wheel drive model, which is what we're driving right here, 21 if you opt for all-wheel drive. Unlike previous Lexus models, we no longer get a different transmission if you choose the all-wheel drive option. We actually get that same 10-speed automatic transmission. If you want better fuel economy, there is still a hybrid available. But the new LS 500H is quite different than the outgoing LS 600H. This model is much more attainable. At its heart is a 3.5-liter V6 that's fairly related to what we see under this hood, only without the turbochargers, of course. That engine produces 295 horsepower on its own, and it's mated to 2 electric motors and a planetary gear set. Those two electric motors bump power up to 354 horsepower total, and the way that power gets delivered in this hybrid system is a little bit different, because this is not the same hybrid system that we find in the Lexus GSH or some of the other Lexus hybrids out there, because this hybrid model actually uses not only a planetary power split device, but also a 4-speed automatic transmission. That combination gives you 10 effective ratios, shifts that feel more like a traditional automatic transmission, but we still get the high fuel economy that you'd expect out of a Lexus hybrid, up to 28 miles per gallon combined, depending on how you drive the vehicle. For this twin-turbo V6, Lexus decided to put the turbos on the outside of the engine, not in the valley of the engine like we see in some of the German designs. The blocks that you see on top of the engine, on the left and on the right, are water-to-air intercoolers. These help reduce the length of the plumbing system and help improve response of the engine. Making the latest active safety technologies available in your luxury car isn't exactly new. But what is new is what Lexus is doing, and they're making all of their latest active safety technologies standard in just about every car in their lineup. For 2018, we get two different systems available in the LS. The base model is labeled the LSS system, or Lexus Safety System, that gives us standard radar adaptive cruise control, standard auto high beams, lane keeping assistance, pre-collision warning with autonomous braking, and pedestrian detection. It's all enabled by a camera right here behind the windscreen, and of course the radar sensor at the front of the vehicle. You can also add the next level up, which is the LSS plus AP system that adds a stereo camera system right here behind the windscreen and expanded radar ability. Those additional systems allow active steering assist, which actually will let the LS steer to avoid an accident. So if it thinks you're going to hit something and the best option is to steer as well as brake, then this car will do that as well. Of course, the model we're driving today does not have LSS plus AP, but if it did, it would also expand the operation of the pre-collision warning and braking system, and it would give us lane centering ability. That's a little bit beyond lane keeping assistance. It would also expand the pre-collision detection system to include bicycles, not just pedestrians. So the model we're driving right here detects just pedestrians walking along the road. The other one will detect bicycles as well. Previous generations of the LS didn't have quite the same range of front seat adjustability that we found in the competition, but that's definitely not the case for the 2018 LS. The model that we're driving features their new 28-way power driver's seat and a 28-way power passenger seat as well. There's so many different ways of adjusting this seat that you can't adjust it all by the controls on the side of the seat. You actually have to use the infotainment system to control some of the motions. You can adjust the curvature of the seat back cushion, the curvature of the seat bottom cushion, the thigh cushion extensions, inflatable side bolsters, 4-way electric adjustable headrests with memory, of course, and of course 4-way adjustable lumbar support and a power tilt telescopic steering column, as you'd expect out of a Lexus. If you can't find a comfortable position in these seats, you're probably not human. Although most of the German competition offer front seats that are just about as adjustable as what we see in the LS, they will cost you significantly more and they're not necessarily going to be that much more comfortable. One option I would definitely get with the LS is their all-new front seat massage feature. It actually has one of the best front seat massages available in the luxury segment. If you're looking for a car that will give you shihatsu as you drive on your way to work, this is going to be one of the best options. It's far more aggressive on your back than what we see in the BMW 7 Series. Of course, it's not going to be nearly as aggressive as that $2,000 or $3,000 massaging chair that you just bought for your home, but it is going to be as good as you can get in a luxury car. And that's why I'm going to give these front seats 10 out of 10 points very easily. Rear seat comfort, on the other hand, I actually found to be a little bit disappointing. Of course, keep in mind that this is as compared to other full-size luxury cars. Obviously, I have a large amount of legroom left here because we are in an extended wheelbase luxury sedan. However, that said, if you look at the list on the side of your screen, you'll notice that the Lexus LS actually has less rear legroom than most of the key competition. Obviously, the importance of that will vary customer to customer. If you're looking at this as an executive transport vehicle, something like that 7 Series is going to give the customer a little bit more room, but this is still very comfortable even for taller families. Sitting upright in this back seat, my hair is just barely brushing the ceiling, so we definitely have more headroom back here than the average mid-size luxury sedan. And then if I scoot all the way over to the right side of the car, this front seat is all the way back in its tracks, I still have about 2 inches of legroom left. This really is where you'll notice a bigger difference between this and some of those German entries, where we get more legroom on the right side of the car. Rear seat passengers get a fold-down center armrest and 2 cup holders in the base model. There is, of course, an executive package available that will give us massaging rear seats with heating and ventilation. As you'd expect out of a large luxury car, we find a large cargo area back here, ranging between 17 cubic feet on the large end, which is the model we're driving right here, and 15.5 cubic feet on the small end. You'll actually find the smallest trunk in the top-end version of the LS, not the hybrid model, because everything going on for that executive rear seat package has to go somewhere, and that somewhere is the very back of the trunk, and that's why it does shrink down a little bit. As we look around this interior, keep in mind that we are not in a top-end trim, and of course we are in the F Sport version, so there are going to be a few differences between this and the other editions of the LS. In addition to the suede headliner, the model that we're driving also has suede inserts in the seats. You'll see those right there on the side cushions. We also have some non-perforated sections and perforated center sections because, of course, these seats are both heated and ventilated. And then we see more of that faux suede material going on there right at the bottom of that seat. We see more of that same material and, of course, more of that red leather going on the front doors. These are all soft touch materials, as you'd expect in a full-size luxury car. So we have some very interesting stitching going on there on the front doors. There are a wide variety of different treatments you can have in this interior. From this angle, you can see the ambient lighting system that we have in the LS. This is not quite as much of a light show as we see in some of the Germans, but it is very nicely executed. As we move on to the main portion of the dashboard, you'll notice one of the more controversial features of this interior. It's this odd panel right here in front of the front passenger. It has this sort of geometric design on it, and it does light up at night, but it doesn't really do much other than that. In an interesting move, it is actually under the same piece of plastic as this large infotainment LCD right here, as well as the clock. So if I actually touch it, you're not touching the screen, you're actually touching that plastic, same piece of plastic all the way across the dashboard. The glove compartment on the passenger side is a slot style compartment. I was able to fit a large tablet computer in there, but just barely, so ones that are a little bit off of the iPad standard in terms of size might not fit quite right. In the center of the dashboard, we have the latest Lexus infotainment and navigation system. This is a large, over 12-inch LCD, but it's not a touchscreen like we see in some of the competition. Instead, we use the Lexus remote touch controller, which we've seen in other Lexus vehicles. It's a touchpad in the center of the console that we'll get to a little bit later. It works sort of like a mouse, so I move this around by moving my finger on the touchpad, sort of like interacting with a laptop computer, and then we get some feedback based on which option we've selected. One of the key omissions in this system, of course, is that we don't find Apple CarPlay or Android Auto at this time, but Lexus has actually started to roll that out along their latest lineup, so we do expect to see it, for instance, in the new 2019 Lexus ES, so it should only be a matter of time until the Lexus LS gets it. While I'm here, we should also talk about seat adjustments. So if you press the seat button in the center console, which we'll get to in just a little bit, we pull up this driver's seat adjustment screen. You can click over to the passenger seat or seat climate right there on the left. This is how you would adjust some of the settings not available in those seat controls on the side of the seat. So four-way adjustable lumbar support, inflatable back bolsters, inflatable seat bottom cushion bolsters, the curvature of the seat, the four-way adjustable lumbar support, the curvature of the seat bottom cushion, and then interestingly enough, we have an extra little bolster at the bottom of the cushion that is adjusted separately from the one on the top or from the four-way adjustable lumbar support. So it gives you a lot of different ways to customize that seat back. Below that large infotainment screen, we find the start-stop button, 2 large air vents right there, and then the controls for the front 2 climate control zones. Again, this particular vehicle does not have the optional 4-zone climate control system. The shifter is a modern joystick design. Park is this button right here. For drive, we pull over to the left and then back towards the driver. For reverse, we do the same and then push away from the driver right like that. For the manual mode, we simply toggle down, and if you want neutral, you just toggle to the left without pulling up or down. Behind that, we find the control interface for the Lexus infotainment and navigation system. I have to say this is probably my least favorite method for interacting with the navigation system. Although using a touchpad as an input method is fairly intuitive, I find that it takes an awful lot more time with your eyes off the road in order to interact with the system versus some of the touchscreen systems. Behind that, we find that button to go directly to that seat adjustment menu and a button to raise and lower the rear sunshade. To the right of that, we find 2 large cup holders right there beneath this lid. And of course, if you got some of the other models of LS, then this would all be covered in wood, but because we're in the F Sport trim, it's just black plastic. Between the front seats, we find this large padded center armrest. It opens from each side, so you can see we press a button right there to open it from the driver's side, one over here to open it from the passenger side. On the inside, we find a relatively large storage compartment for a rear-wheel drive vehicle. There's a small removable shelf right there where you can put wallets or small items. You can also put very small items or keys, lipsticks, things like that right there in that smaller well. And then phones or other things like that can go right down there at the bottom. This is also where we find 2 USB inputs, an auxiliary input, and a 12-volt power port. On the driver's side, we find a relatively small LCD instrument cluster for a modern luxury car. This is definitely smaller than the LCD that we find in the center console. This one's about 8 inches. Personally, I found this to be a little bit disappointing because I had expected to see a larger display in Lexus's flagship. The LCD is quite similar to what we see in other Lexus models. Since we're in the F Sport, we have this moving ring that you can see right there. This is actually a physical element, and when I click the button on the steering wheel, the physical element slides across as the LCD actually changes. Zooming out from the instrument cluster, you'll see one of the more controversial design elements in the new LS and actually the new ES as well. It's this spindle-designed instrument cluster hood. It actually kind of mimics what's going on with the grille. And we have 2 knobs, one on either side. The one over here on the left disengages traction control and of course engages the snow mode with a turn. The one on the right side, this engages the different drive modes. So we have Sport, Sport Plus up that way, Comfort and Eco that way. And if you want normal or custom, we press the center. On the one hand, it is easy to access the drive modes, but personally, I'm not a huge fan of the look. Let me know what you think about that down there below. Moving out from there, we have a 3-spoke steering wheel with paddle shifters on the back, down on the left, and up over there on the right. This is also where you'll find the controls for that multi-function LCD over here on the left side, back button, dedicated phone button, voice command button, volume up and down. And then on this side, we have mode, track forward, backward, and the controls for the radar adaptive cruise control system, as well as the lane keeping assistance. The naturally aspirated V8 engines that we've found under the hood of the Lexus LS since it started in America really have been one of the defining features about the vehicle. And of course, the 2018 LS is very different with this twin-turbo V6 under there. So we no longer get that throaty, naturally aspirated V8 engine sound. Instead, it's been replaced by somewhat more sedate engine sounds from the V6 engine under the hood, and of course, the exhaust note that you come to expect from a turbocharged engine. Obviously, that means that under hard acceleration, things sound very different than last year, but when it comes to overall performance, they're different in a good way, because we ran from 0 to 60 in 4.7 seconds in this model. Now, that is 1/10 of a second slower than Lexus claims this car will do. However, it is still a very respectable score for this segment. Keep in mind that base models of the competition don't have this much power under the hood, and that is also a pretty big change for the Lexus LS. This stops from 60 miles an hour back to 0 in a very short 109 feet. That is about the same stopping distance that we see in a number of competitive mid-size luxury sedans. So something like a Volvo S90 or a BMW 550 will not necessarily stop that much shorter than this, even though they may weigh less than this. This weighs about 4,700 pounds in the version that we're driving right here, and the LS will go up to about 5,100 pounds if you fully load the vehicle. There are a ton of options available, as you'd expect from a large luxury car, like a full 4-corner air suspension, the rear executive seats that massage and heat and cool, etc., and all of that, of course, adds weight. But overall, the LS does an excellent job of disguising that curb weight. Now, in terms of our overall handling score, I am going to have to give this a B, because there are other full-size luxury sedans that will handle better than this. But they're not going to be direct competitors to the LS 500, so do keep that in mind when you take a look at that score. Lexus, of course, has had a well-deserved reputation for making very reliable vehicles, but people that haven't driven a Lexus before often don't realize that Lexus also has a reputation for making excellent handling vehicles. As with the previous generation of the LS, the road feel of this car is actually very, very good. And that's because Lexus really has an internal dedication to designing vehicles that perform well out on the road. Now, in the past, that did not include 0 to 60 performance, and that's really what's changed with this generation of the LS. We now have the thrust to match the Germans, and of course we have the chassis precision that we've always had in the LS. But again, we normally talk about vehicles within a category, and within the full-size luxury sedan category, there are vehicles that will handle better, and that's why I'm going to give this a B. When it comes to the overall ride, I'm going to give this particular model a B as well, because this is the F Sport version. And the F Sport does have a slightly firmer suspension than what we find in the rest of the LS lineup. Now, if you want a really comfortable ride, then Lexus does offer the LS with an available air suspension. Now, if you get that air suspension, then I would rate the overall ride quality in the LS a solid A+. In terms of cabin noise, this vehicle actually surprised me, but not in the best way. We scored 70.5 decibels at 50 miles an hour in the model that we're driving, again, the F Sport trim. That's notably louder than I expected it to be, and a lot of that noise was road noise, so I think it has something to do with the tires that come standard on this particular model. It seems to be a little bit quieter in the regular non-F Sport version of the LS. However, it actually was a little bit louder than the last BMW 7 Series or A8 or Mercedes-Benz S-Class that we've driven. On the flip side, when it comes to fuel economy, the model that we've been driving surprised me in a very, very good way. This is rated for 23 miles per gallon combined, according to the ePay. This is a rear-wheel drive version of the LS 500, and we've actually been beating that by a full 3 miles per gallon. And keep in mind that I do drive up and over a 2,200-foot mountain pass every day, so this really is quite surprising for a full-size luxury sedan. In fact, at 26 miles per gallon combined, this is awfully close to the fuel economy that you'll get in a BMW 7 Series plug-in hybrid, assuming you're not plugging it in, of course. Now, if you want even better fuel economy, the LS 500H will get you over 28 miles per gallon in real-world driving. Some shoppers might even get about 30 miles per gallon out of that vehicle, depending on your exact blend of city and highway driving. It's obvious when you get behind the wheel of the LS 500 that Lexus really decided to push themselves with this generation in terms of making the driving experience better than the competition's base models. Lexus has long been a very conservative company, and that's why we've seen those naturally aspirated V8 engines under the hood for so long. We've also generally seen slightly older transmission designs when the model was equipped with all-wheel drive, but we don't see that in this LS. All models get the 10-speed, all models get the twin-turbo V6, except for the hybrid models, of course. And of course, Lexus didn't just give this any old twin-turbo V6, they made sure that this engine produced more power than the base 6-cylinder engines from the competition. And that really is huge, because in the past you would say, well, the Lexus is a little bit slower 0 to 60 than the base 6-cylinder turbocharged engines from the competition, but it costs less. And now you can say something completely different. You can say the Lexus LS 500 beats the Mercedes-Benz S-Class or the BMW 7 Series with the base engine 0 to 60, and it costs significantly less. And that's a pretty big difference. Yet you're not giving up anything in terms of handling ability or overall suspension precision, because again, this really is a very well-sorted chassis. The pricing of the LS is very important to keep in mind when comparing this to the competition, because the LS is significantly less expensive than the German options. It starts at $75,000 for the base rear-wheel drive model. That is considerably less expensive, especially than a Mercedes-Benz S-Class. Now, obviously on the inside, it is a little bit smaller than the 7 Series or the S-Class still, so you do have to keep that in mind as well. While that size difference could be seen as sort of a negative for the LS, you do need to keep in mind that the LS has significantly better base performance than most of those alternatives, because we just have that one twin-turbo V6 engine. The F-Sport model that we were driving this week started at $81,000. You do pay a decent premium for that F-Sport model, which gives you the different gauges that you saw when we took a look at the interior, the sport seats, sport suspension, and of course the sport grille. Before we move on to the competition, it's important to remember that the Lexus LS is very well equipped as a base vehicle. We have a lot of gadgets and goodies that you can see on the list that we don't find in all of the competition's base models. Now, if I were shopping in this segment, I would add a little bit more to the price of the base LS. I would get the 24-inch heads-up display, the Zillion-way power front seats with the massage. Those seats are definitely worth the price, even though you have to get bundled option packages in order to get them. Adding those to the base model will bring you just under $90,000. Now, we'll also get you the panoramic roof, upgraded leather, air suspension, upgraded safety package, and the suede headliner. Let's keep that nicely equipped $90,000 price tag in mind as we move on into the competition, because that is just about the base price of a Mercedes-Benz S-Class, specifically the S450. The LS is all about value when you compare it to the Mercedes-Benz S-Class. The S-Class can get fantastically expensive, and you will get an awful lot more content in the Lexus than you'll get in the Mercedes for the same price. In fact, if you were to try and comparably equip a Mercedes-Benz S-Class to the way that I would prefer getting a Lexus LS, it would set you back about $110,000. So that is $20,000 more. It's also worth noting that the Lexus is going to be more reliable than the Mercedes, so if you value reliability, the Lexus is definitely the way to go. We see something very similar when we move on over to the BMW 7 Series. The 7 Series in the past has been the slightly smaller, slightly sportier, slightly more affordable German option, but for 2018 it starts at $97,100, so it is fairly expensive, and it's also much bigger than it has been in the past. It actually is about the same size as the Mercedes S-Class and has one of the largest and most accommodating back seats in this category. I really like the new 7 Series look, both inside and outside. It's elegant, it's restrained outside, the interior is incredibly well put together, and all the gadgets and gizmos are very, very nicely integrated. Everything has a very premium feel to it. But like the Mercedes, you're definitely going to pay for that extra refinement, because comparably equipping a BMW 7 Series to that $90,000 LS that I would buy, you will definitely pay about $20,000 more for the BMW. And while the BMW may feel a little bit more refined than the Lexus, we're talking just a few percent more refined, but it is going to cost you more than 20% more. That brings us along to an odd value entry in this segment, the 2018 Audi A8. For 2018, the A8 is available in both short and long formats, although the short format is the sporty version, so it's actually more expensive than the base A8 long wheelbase. When comparably equipped to that LS model, it actually comes in a little bit less expensive at $84,500. That's because Audi is making the executive package on the A8L very, very inexpensive. That's how we get most of those features that are required to bring the A8 up to that same level of equipment in that $90,000 LS. Of course, the big thing to remember is that the 2018 A8L is the end of the line for this generation of the Audi. Audi has already released the new 2019 Audi A8, although we don't have it in the US yet, and we don't know how much it will cost. But I wouldn't be surprised if the 2019 model was significantly more expensive than the Lexus. It is probably going to be comparably priced to the BMW and the Mercedes. So that's going to mean if you want the value option in 2018, get the Audi. If you want the value option in 2019, the Lexus is likely going to be the better buy. Lastly, we have the Genesis G90. This is the value full-size luxury entry. You can think of the G90 as sort of where Lexus was about 20 years ago. $75,345 will buy you the fully loaded Genesis G90. That's only $345 more than the absolute base price on the Lexus LS500. The Genesis is extremely well equipped for that price. It definitely beat the last Lexus LS in terms of gadgets, gizmos for your money, as well as interior quality. But this LS is actually quite different because the LS has gone to a new level and we don't see that same attention of detail in the Genesis cabin. Of course, one of the big differences between the Genesis and the Lexus is that Lexus really has been pursuing having the same level of options, gadgets, and customization that we see in the Germans. So we see a wider variety of interior color options, wood palettes, exterior colors, etc., different ways of configuring your vehicle. Whereas configuration on the Genesis is really quite limited, and that's one of the ways they get to that low sticker price. It struck me as interesting, actually. Genesis, in general, is in the same position as Lexus when Lexus first started, but the market has changed considerably since then. Lexus broke into the mainstream luxury segment with a vehicle that challenged what you know about a luxury car. Basically, that luxury could be made to be reliable and very precisely built. But Genesis is coming to the table with a very competitive entry, but without the same kind of story or same kind of sales proposition that Lexus had back then. But again, the Genesis is an incredible value. So if you're looking at the Lexus and you're thinking to yourself, I can really only afford a base model or perhaps just a few options on the base vehicle, you might be happier with a fully loaded Genesis. I think that I would definitely, because you get a lot of features for a lot less cash. Before this generation of LS was announced, I said that I would take the Genesis G90 over the Lexus LS, but that's changed. I would take the Lexus LS over the G90 as long as I had the cash. But now we have to come to the tricky question. Would I take the LS over a 7 Series or an S-Class? My answer is yes and no. If I were to lease the vehicle, then no, I would take the BMW 7 Series. It is probably my favorite entry in this segment at the moment. Excellent driving dynamics, well-designed interior, and I like the overall look and the overall package just a little bit better than the Mercedes-Benz. It's also a better value than the Mercedes. However, if I were going to buy a luxury car, especially if I were going to buy it and keep it for over 5 years, then hands down I would buy the Lexus LS. even though this generation of Lexus has more things to go wrong, we have that twin-turbo engine, the 10-speed automatic, etc., Lexus has a solid dedication to reliability, so I don't expect this Lexus LS to be that far off previous generations in terms of long-term reliability or expected maintenance costs. So if you plan on keeping your luxury car for a long time, hands down, the Lexus LS is going to be the best option for you. Be sure and let me know what you think about that down there in the comment section below. Hit that subscribe button down there if you haven't already done so. Remember that subscribing is very important so that we can get access to vehicles like the Lexus LS for a review like this. You can also click up there to the top of your screen to be taken on over to our Patreon page. That way you can support this channel. I hope you want to do that. And then I will see you next week.